preview show. My name is Shy Guy, and as always, I am joined by a couple of very talented beat writers over at the Game Haus. You know, back again as is usual. We've got Ethan Brunestor in the house, our Guangzhou beat writer, and then making his first appearance here on the preview show is going to be Duran Scott, our Atlanta beat writer. How are you doing today, my man?
Pretty good. I'm glad to be here. How are you guys doing?
I'm just excited to get into it, and because we've had a really kind of spicy week in the Overwatch League last week. We've got some more of that action coming everybody's way later on tonight. Games kick off an hour and a half later than normal, with one fewer game on the tonight at least. But we are going to be here to help you get ready for all of that action. But before we do that, we're going to start things off, as we always do here on WatchHaus, by resetting our watch and reminding everyone at home, what we've been up to over the past week or so since the last time we were on the show. And I'll kick things off because I don't really have a ton to talk about here, because I've been dealing with some offline issues in my life, moving over the past few days. So I've been incredibly busy getting all of that. I spent all of last weekend packing and watching the ridiculous weekend of Overwatch that we had. Just everything went to heck, and it made it made the time fly while I was packing. So I was appreciative because of that, but otherwise not a ton to talk about on my side of things. Of course, always doing the recaps for Vancouver. I actually got to do my first loss recap of the regular season this year.
What a milestone.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And of course, the preview out earlier this week. So if you want to hear my thoughts on how they'll respond to that loss, be sure to check that one out.
And conversely, Sam had his first win recap that he was on last year, or last week. So yeah,
so
it's coalescence.
Bounced out,
yeah.
I'm not gonna take all the credit, but he was on the preview show last week, so take that as you will. Hopefully that might mean good things for Atlanta this week.
That means I should have actually been on next week, because we're on a bye this week.
Oh no!
Oh no!
You missed your jinx.
I used all my luck already. No luck builds here in Atlanta.
Oh wow. Well, in that case, Duran, just let us know what have you been up to over the past week or so.
Just kind of taking a look at some of the things that Atlanta could do. I realized that Baby Bay had a birthday, but some of the things that are going to be coming out this weekend, because we have no games, is going to be how Sombra has been shaking up Atlanta's playstyle against Atlanta, and how they can, moving forward, do a little better. And I've just been trying to scout some stuff to kind of get ready for some of the changes coming up. How about you, Ethan?
I've been doing a lot of offline stuff. Started a new summer job, so I've been working on that. It was slow on Sunday, so I was able to check in with the matches, and I'm really glad I did. I missed the first one, but I caught basically right around when Boston started winning, and then caught the very last map of the Florida one, and we closed the shop, and I went to the bathroom and hid for 10 minutes just so I could watch that end of Gibraltar Bastion strat coming out, where Zephyr saved his entire team. And then the Valiant winning over Vancouver. So been an interesting week. Just got my preview out. Can't really say that we're going to be in recap jail anymore, though, because we're changing up how that's going to work, and focusing more on featured creative pieces. So that'll be in the future, saying while we're in recap jail, we won't be able to really say that anymore, will we?
Yeah,
it's like brick jail, but for
exactly, yeah.
Everybody's starting to get out of brick jail at least a little bit, especially with 222 lock maybe coming in the future. Definitely seems like it's coming in the future. We'll have a little bit of a discussion about that in just a little bit. But first, let's kick things off with some different news that just came down the pipeline earlier today, at least officially, and that is that Fissure is leaving the Seoul Dynasty. Now, this is a player who's been like a staple of the Overwatch League to date, was arguably one of the most prominent and impactful players of Season 1, has been a little bit up and down during Season 2, as Seoul has been juggling their lineups and changing things around all the time. Hasn't quite been the same kind of star player, but now going to be leaving the team and perhaps leaving Overwatch for the foreseeable future at least, considering his comments about dealing with burnout and things like that. So, Duran, since this is your first time here, what is your kind of first reaction to seeing Fissure leave?
Well, following his career after the beginning of season 2, I wasn't surprised by any means. Fissure, like you said, he's been a tentpole of the league since its inception, and he's been very vocal on any team he's been on about anything that hasn't been to his liking. And the news of him leaving, I could see why he'd be burned out, because he's the kind of player that's very emotional, very driven, very hard on himself, but he's also hard on his team. And that amount of energy and throughput tolls on a person after a while. And it's very challenging to keep that level of consistency up, especially if you're starting to feel frustrated, because Soul's running 2 different lineups or 3, depending on how they swap around some of the flex roles that they have. But I think the fact that he leaked pretty considerable information that was already kind of rumored around just kind of shows to the character of him on the long run. Because if you want him to come back as a league, that's not the way to buy that kind of respect and that love, to keep those doors open. But that was my first response. I wasn't surprised. It's Fissure being Fissure.
Yeah, he's always been a very volatile kind of personality just in general. I mean, if you think back to last season, leaving the way things ended with the Gladiators kind of gives you an idea. And I gotta say I agree with you. It's not too surprising to see.
I mean, I definitely think, also ignore my dog barking in the background. I definitely think that it's hard to remember sometimes that Fissure is basically a pretty young player, just like most of these players in the league are. And I think that a lot of people talk about the kind of the burnout that most players this age have. They have a lot of high personality sometimes. And as much as a lot of people kind of want to think Fisher's an anti-hero in a way, or that him jumping kind of from team to team makes him kind of almost want to be disliked, I think that it is important to remember that he is just kind of a kid in a way. And I hope he continues with a successful career through this and that this doesn't damage him too much. I think Seoul as a whole, they probably made the best decision with this, because I think he wasn't getting the time that he wanted in the starting roster. Marvel has been working for them a lot better, I think. And I do like Marvel a lot as a player. Fisher's kind of, I wouldn't even say B team. He was just working with a very specific lineup. And I think that didn't really work for Seoul. But now Seoul doesn't have a 12-man roster anymore, so that might change their plans a little bit. I don't think they'll be hurt too much by it, but it does put a lot of pressure on Marvel then.
It definitely does. And, I think this was kind of an unfortunate situation in some ways for Fissure, because I don't think he was ever the kind of player who was going to thrive in this type of system. I think he is the type of player who, he needs to be the star on your team, like he was for the Gladiators last season. Like, he needs to be the one leading the charge. And if you're constantly taking him out of the lineup, it's signaling to him that, hey, you're not our number one guy. And I mean, that's obviously the direction Seoul wanted to go. So again, it's not super surprising, but I am sad to see him go, because in my opinion, he was one of the best villains in the Overwatch League, as much as we really have villains. But he was a guy that was very polarizing, and those types of players are kind of hard to come by. So it's sad to see a talent like him leave. But hopefully this might not be the end for him in Overwatch. Maybe he just needs some time off. Might be back for season 3. I definitely think there are teams out there that could use a talent like him on their team. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Fissure and how Seoul, adapts to this going forward. Like you said, Marvel's been great so far, but it's just one more tool that they no longer have in their tool belt.
Well, you talk about him, being able to keep good graces with the teams in the league. Well, you look back at Defran, you look back at Seagull, look back at XQC. They all managed to at least stay in good graces with Blizzard in some capacity, and a lot of them were featured streamers for the teams that they used to play on. Mm-hmm. So I think if the dust settles and it really looks back as really wasn't that big of a deal because of how many leaks like Slasher put out in the first place, that we kind of just buy him some forgiveness there. But I think a lot of these players, especially because they are kids, they need better support in their background, because a lot of their burnout and a lot of things that they're having issues with are easily preventable by just having measures in place to kind of protect their experiences and protect the energy that they are giving.
And I think San Francisco specifically has done programs for that. They have like a mental health coach, and I think a lot of the teams, like you said, kind of should implement stuff like that a lot more. Because you made me remember Effect leaving recently, citing depression, and he was very much a similar case of kind of being a really big star for a while, and then on a team that wasn't doing so well and wasn't really feeling him. And I think it's just you get this burnout, you get this feelings of he's not doing enough, but his team won't put him in more because so you've got all of that going on, and I think, like you said, more teams need this structure in place to kind of help with these players. And as the league goes on, you would expect in order for sustainability, they'd have to start doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as the league continues on, they're gonna keep getting better at this kind of stuff. Like right now, the infrastructure is not there. You don't have guys who have been in the league for 3, 4, 5 years who can take a young player under their wing and kind of show them the ropes, which I think is massive. Like just the institutional kind of infrastructure that goes on there goes a long way to helping players adapt to what is objectively just a massive change in your life when you become a player at this level. It's something that I don't think anyone is really prepared for. And some people handle it better than others, but it is definitely something that the league as a whole needs to be considering as they continue to move forward, especially as we look to add geolocation next year. Like that just ramps this kind of stuff up.
Imagine all this plus jet lag.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're traveling around. Like it's gonna be crazy to watch, and teams will definitely have to be mindful of this kind of stuff going forward. But let's move on from there. We've said what we've got to say about Fissure. So let's talk a little bit about one of the things that Fissure that he leaked on the way out, which is his confirmation that 222 is coming. Now we're at the point where we've heard this from so many sources that I no longer like think it's up in the air. Like this is happening. Unless Blizzard just decides to go back on their previous decision based on the backlash or whatever, it seems like it's happening. So with that in mind, we've talked previously on the show about what our kind of thoughts on 222 are, and whether it's a good idea, bad idea. Don't need to rehash that. It's been done to death at this point by everyone with a mouthpiece in the Overwatch League community. So instead, let's
check our Twitters if you want opinions.
Yeah, for real.
let's talk a little bit instead about how 222 is going to impact the league, and specifically, what it means in terms of the teams as they are currently constructed. Now they've had the news that 222 is coming for a little while now, and we've started to see teams shift the meta. I don't know exactly if that has to do with 222 coming, if that's the reason we've seen things changing up, but teams are preparing for it, and they've got it in mind. But what I want to know is, who do we think that this change will benefit, and then who is going to come away kind of worse for wear after this? Ethan, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I had more of like categories in terms of who I think would benefit and who would be kind of disenfranchised by this. I think the teams that'll be hurt the most by this change in process are the teams that have started to run more wacky triple DPS kind of strategies. I cited specifically the Chinese teams. You got Shanghai, you got Chengdu, and you got Guangzhou. They've all been running a lot more triple DPS. And I think that they will be very much hurt by this because they finally found their own niche, really, in this meta. You could even probably put Houston in there as well, with kind of finally trying to break away from goats and doing what works for them. And then now it's like, okay, but that strategy isn't going to work anymore. You'll have two of those players still playing DPS, and of course, I'm going to cite Guangzhou, my own team. You've got Hoppa, one of the best probably flexes in the league, being able to play, even though he's a flex tank, he's able to play Pharah, Sombra, and Tracer at a high level. He's not going to be able to play any of those anymore. And you've got Chengdu, and you've got Shanghai running these triple DPS strats. They got rid of Guardian just the other day, who was one of their off tanks. So you won't be able to do that. Like, I think it'll be good for players overall, and having like, they won't at least be worried about whether or not they'll ever be able to play again, unless they're like one tricks. But I think with those teams, those strategies just won't be viable anymore. The teams that I think will benefit, on the other hand, are ones that are there's a couple ones specifically near the bottom that I'm thinking of. The Justice, maybe the Defiant as well. I definitely think Philly will probably be the biggest growth because
Okay.
Carpe and EQ are just mad lads on
Yeah,
DPS,
you know,
and they are
Carpe's
just
been waiting for this. Like,
Carpe's been yeah. Dallas, I think, because Zachary has such a deep pool, they do still have a sizable amount of. Yet they still have Taimu, they still have Mickey for whatever he's doing. They have these DPS players, and they have AKM, obviously. They have these really. I think teams with the biggest DPS pool will have the best chance, and that's why I think the shock actually won't drop that much because they still have 4 DPS players. I mean, we've been seeing Sinatra and we've been seeing Rascal, but also they've still got Architect and they've still got Striker on the bench this entire time. We haven't seen any Striker. I think that maybe in those cases you could have these players already practicing DPS on the sidelines, basically. And if they've had this time to practice, they could just bring them in almost immediately while the main DPS who've been playing Brig and Zarya adjust. So I think deep DPS pool or teams with big DPS pools will do the best. And I know you were going to say something about Vancouver, but I think Vancouver does have a good DPS roster, so we'll have to see. But
I mean, I'll take that as I guess a jumping off point because I've heard from so many places that everyone just seems so convinced that Vancouver is going to remain an elite team when 222 becomes a reality. And I gotta say, I'm just not completely convinced. And the reasons for that is because this team has just thrived so immensely under 3-3 and under goats. Every single one of their players has a claim or a reasoning that you could consider them at the very least like a top 3 player at their position. There's not a single one of them who is kind of middle of the pack. And while I still think they have an immense amount of talent, like Slime, Twilight, Janu, when you move over to 222, those guys are not going to have any trouble adapting whatsoever. Their hero pools are great. They are incredibly talented on those specific roles, and I think they're going to be great. Now, is Bumper going to be the same level of main tank that he is in GOATS, where he gets all of these resources and all of this focus from his team? I'm not 100% sure, but the DPS side of things does have me a little bit worried. Haxel, I think, is flexible enough that he's going to be mostly fine for the most part, but he's probably the best Brig in the world, and he's not going to be the best DPS player in the world. And I feel like 100% confident saying that. He's just not. Even when he's gotten to breakout DPS during this season, it hasn't been the best. Like, his Genji didn't really impress me. Obviously, this is not Genji's meta, so grain of salt there for sure. But it's I'm worried because we haven't seen Stitch play in a year basically. We haven't seen Hureg play. We haven't seen Sumansu play a lot of DPS, and what we have seen hasn't been elite in my mind. So I'm certainly worried about Vancouver. I still think they'll be a good team no matter what. But they're not going to be the team that pulled off a 19 game winning streak anymore. It's just not realistic, I think, to expect that same level from them. And they'll have to adapt, and they've seen it all as a team. So like they're not going to be dropping to the bottom of the pack. They're not going to be missing playoffs or like I don't think they'll be going out in the first round of playoffs or anything like that. But it could spell a little bit of trouble for them. The big winner in my mind is definitely London. The season 1 champs have struggled all season to really find their groove when it comes to goats. They just don't seem fully comfortable on it. They started the season with Birdring playing the Zarya, Prophet on the Brig. They've since swapped that up, and it's been a very good change for them. But they're still not up at the top tier. But when we go back to 222, when we go to stuff that they're more comfortable, you can unleash Prophet on the DPS. You can get Birdring on the Widowmaker perhaps, or on the Tracer at times, and he can actually make a real impact, which I don't feel like he's doing right now. And you'll get to see Gesture back on Winston a little bit more. You'll get to see him play Orisa at this point, which is his bread and butter. So I think like the change overall will be very good for London, and they become a very dangerous team in my mind, especially as we move into playoffs once again.
See, for me, I still think China is going to have a team that comes and pushes through this change. I think specifically Shanghai has the option, the opportunity to show what they have, because I don't want to take anything away from Dia or Youngjin at all. But I think the DPS duo of DM and Ding are on the same level of Ikeo and Carpe. I think they're mega threats, and I think if they lean into actually having Gegari play off tank for once, I think it'll work. I don't attribute her running the bench right now as anything having to do with her skill. I think just having off tanks that can flex to the hit scan DPS and really just make those changes to Sombra like we've been seeing. I think that's really going to be what changes you notice from Shanghai. As far as some other teams that I think will work out belt, my team, Atlanta. I think Atlanta is going to have a nice cushy spot to settle in this meta change. We ought to get to see Enlayer and Erster jump on DPS. We don't have to worry about Baby Bay. We don't have to worry about Baby Bay wasting grass because I'm pretty sure his DPS pool is a lot better than his Zarya play because, he builds grass almost as fast as Sinatra, but they both waste them because they're DPS players and they're used to just sending out ults whenever they're ready to go. Mm-hmm. As far as losers, I do think Vancouver is going to take a little bit of a hit. I don't think they're going to keep this nearly unbroken streak for a long time. I think they're going to take some hits and take some losses, and it'll be okay. They'll still be a top team. But I think the power creep of the league will start to catch up to them because the outplay potential of the DPS players is going to overturn the teamwork meta that we're in right now. We can call it guild, we can call it 3-3 all we want. It's a teamwork meta. And I think being able to allow these DPS players that are getting paid to click heads do their jobs is going to just make Vancouver feel a little bit more mortal. Those are just my major picks from that point. But other than that, I think this interesting. This stage 4 is going to be something to watch.
Yeah,
for sure. It's going to be absolutely wild. It's going to be a Wild West in Overwatch League right now as teams kind of scramble to figure out what is going to be the optimal way to play, because I don't think anyone really knows what the meta is going to be when 2-2-2 comes through.
It'll be stage 1, week 1 all over again, where 27 heroes are being played.
But you know what the problem is too with the changes? The balance changes that they made don't affect, they affect rank, like the stuff that we play, right?
Yeah.
But they'd have to rebalance the supports at the minimum to actually do a 2-2-2.
Right.
Because you can't have a back line of Brig and Lucio, because they, outside of goats or comps where everyone kind of huddles together, outside of a death ball, they don't really heal much, and they don't provide enough value on their own. So I think they're going to have to retool some of the off supports to really just provide more, or to change their kits so they're more dynamic to fit that 2-2-2 lock.
We might see 2 main healers like Ana, Mercy again. We could see Zen. We could see Baptiste, but I think like Moira, like Brig, Lucio are going to have trouble popping up.
Yeah, or maybe they could lean into the hybrid characters, because we have characters like Roadhog and Zenyatta and Mei and Soldier that fit these hybrid roles. Maybe they could tune them a little bit so maybe they get played and they can overshadow that role lock, because they're technically taking up the functions of another role. Mm-hmm. Because realistically, why do we have Soldier if we have Baptiste?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. The balance around 2-2-2 is one of the more interesting, aspects of this change that's coming through as the team kind of. I hope that when the change comes through, it comes with balance changes immediately. Like if they continue to roll out with basically the same patch, that's a big yikes.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll just have to see what comes. Blizzard, for their part, has just been like radio silence on this front. They have not wanted to share really anything that's about to happen. So we'll just have to wait and see at this point. We're still in that mode, and we're not that far away. Like it's we're about a month away from stage 4 kicking off, so they don't have a ton of time to really get any changes out there and get feedback and iterate. So I think there's gonna be some growing pains for sure.
It'll be pandemonium, but it'll at least be entertaining to watch.
Welcome to the Overwatch League Stage 4, brought to you by Solo Q.
For sure. Okay, so that's enough on 2-2-2. We've spent more than enough time on that. So let's talk now about kind of the it team right now, the team of the moment, the team that is on everybody's mind, and that is of course the LA Valiant. And after their improbable and completely unexpected win over the Vancouver Titans last week. The question for them now is, can they maintain this momentum now that everyone has them on their radar? Can they still be pulling off upsets? Can they still be kicking bottom team or top teams down a peg now that everyone is ready for what they are going to be bringing to the table in terms of their comps, in terms of their lineups, and just in terms of prepping for them, because I have a feeling they kind of caught Vancouver off guard last week, and that's not to say they didn't deserve that win, because by God they did. They outplayed Vancouver so hard, it was unreal. But I'm curious if we think they're going to be able to keep up that kind of performance at least for the rest of this stage.
I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take it. I think they can. I think there's something about that team that doesn't want to give up, doesn't want to quit, and having the home crowd on their back almost every week is like having a seventh player on the team. And the fact that we got Costa out of jail because he's not too smart to play Overwatch anymore allows him to be the vocal leader and the spiritual leader of the team. Like, if you saw after they won that game, the entire organization practically jumped on stage to share in that interview that he had. And I really think that LA is the truth. I think they're real. I think whatever changes they made in the break that we had between stages allowed them to really, scout and pick out who they wanted to go after, and being able to knock out teams in each tier of the league, I think is more than enough proof to show that they can hang. If Atlanta still gets credit for knocking out NYXL twice in the same season, I'm ready to ride the pine with LA until they prove me otherwise.
I'm not buying it as much. I think that they would be considered a top team, definitely top 10 for sure. I don't really think I could consider them even top 6 at this point. I think that the top 6 in my mind have really been cemented so far. I could list them off. Probably Vancouver, Shock, XL, London, Gladiators, Spark. I don't think that Valiant have a place in that top 6. I think that I would need to see a lot more from them to prove that this wasn't a fluke this past week, that it wasn't just a Vancouver playing on an off day, because that's entirely possible. As now that Vancouver has gotten their first loss after the Stage 2 finals, they really don't have that pressure to keep up the winning streak nonstop, and they could slip up on games, start not even sandbagging. They could start sandbagging, but just
NYXL.
yeah, NYXL right there. Just not trying as hard because it doesn't really matter anymore. They don't have any streak to keep up. I think that the Valiant are certainly good. I just don't think we will talk about this later, but I think they have 2 matches this week, and I don't think that they're going to go 2-0 because they play against London and Hangzhou, which are 2 teams I would again consider top 6 teams. I think they're going to drop at least one of those matches, and depending on the score lines, we'll see how much they can maintain that momentum. But I'm not sold on it.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely going to have their chance to convince you this week. Games against the Spark and the Spitfire, 2 of those teams you said were in the top 6 there. So, they have their chance to immediately prove that this is legit. Like, if they come away with 2 wins this week, yeah, I'm ready to slot them in as like a top 4 team. It's that level of consistency at that point, because everything you hear about how they're performing in scrims and whatnot suggests that they are really definitely here for the long haul at this point. They have a really good grasp on the meta, and all I gotta give huge props to the Valiant as an organization for being willing to make the changes that are necessary mid-season. Realizing that what they had going on in Stage 1 was not going to cut it at all. And they changed the coaching roster. They changed the roster pretty significantly. And it is paid off in a huge way so far, and has now given a team that should have kind of by all means been out of the competition a chance at making the playoffs at the end of the day. If all they need to do is sneak into that 12th spot, and they are suddenly a very dangerous team, and that becomes much more likely if they can come away with at least 1 or 2 wins this week. It's gonna be a tough one, and we'll be getting into those matchups a little bit later on in the show. But
we said this about Houston though, and look who Houston dropped a match to this week.
We did say this about Houston.
I don't think we were as fully on board with Houston
That's
though,
true.
as most of us are on with the Valiant, so I will say that. But
well, I think at least
it could go down.
At least if they beat Hangzhou, you have to give them credit at least like a little higher in the top 10, because if they beat the number 4 team and it's like a decisive win, right? Like the other 3 ones that they've had most recently, at least then you can start to like, all right, now I'm open into the conversation.
Right.
That's true. Houston has pretty easy matches, and they messed even one of those up. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these top teams almost got handled by Atlanta, and that doesn't impress me. So
yeah.
Okay. So we'll come back to LA in just a little bit when we get around to predictions. But now let's take a quick sec to talk about some of the players that we have on our radar for the next week. And I guess I'll kick us off with this one because it ties into what we were just talking about, because my player to watch has got to be Kariv, because that dude just put on in my mind one of like the single best individual performances we've seen in the Overwatch League last week. The way he was performing on Ana was out of this world against Vancouver. The sleep darts he was hitting, the biotic grenade timings and placements were impeccable. He absolutely completely punished Vancouver for never playing D.Va in that series, really. And it just goes to show that he is one of the most individually talented and flexible players that we've got in the entire league. It's easy to forget he started the season playing on DPS again. They've shuffled him back and forth between those roles multiple times during his time with the Valiant, but he keeps finding his way back onto the flex support role, where he continues to show that he needs to be up there when we talk about the best flex supports in the league. When we talk about people like Jonak, Twilight, when we talk about people like Shu, like he needs to be in that conversation, especially as Ana comes back into the meta more and more and more. He was a monster, and with Valiant having such a huge week coming up in terms of their opponents, my eyes are going to be on Kariv a lot. I am going to be making great use of the command center this week during the Valiant's games. I've got to keep the camera on him at all times, because you blink and you'll miss something absolutely spectacular.
My player... Oh, sorry. The player that I was going to watch this week, we talked about Fisher earlier, which means Seoul really only has one main tank left, and that's Marvel. I think Marvel has actually been a really good player so far for them this entire season. I've written recaps on some of Seoul's earlier games, and I've noticed him doing really good plays overall. I think the pressure might be on a little bit more now that he knows that Fisher isn't there as a backup for him, so he's really the only one who can perform at that level. I think he's still going to do well, and right now Seoul has games against Paris and Chengdu this week, and I think they're both easily winnable. If they start to slip up, I think that's where we kind of find issue with Seoul's decision to let Fisher go, and kind of questioning how much Marvel can really hold the team on his own, because he's the only one basically that they cannot switch out now, because then one of the games last week they switched out all 6 in between 2 maps. I think it was against the Hangzhou game. All 6 new players were on the stage that threw Hangzhou off completely. You have the consistency of Marvel throughout this entire thing now. It might actually limit Seoul more. So I'm really interested to see if this decision was good and if Marvel will hold up to the expectations.
Yeah, I'm sad we won't get to see the full 6-man roster.
The 6-man swap.
It's absolutely wild to see that happening in a game.
It's like hockey.
As a Hangzhou fan in that match, that was very stressful. It was an entire different team.
Yeah, and it almost worked. They almost turned that series around.
How do you pregame for a team that has 37 players on it? Just like what do you do? It's like a clown. Oh man, it's like a clown fiesta, but a good kind. For me, I surprisingly picked Jonak. I think New York has to go a long way to really prove that they have the spice to hang, and Jonak is kind of like the bumper of the NYXL. They pour a lot of the resources, they pour a lot of the rotations and everything. They make sure he can get eyesight on the enemy Zen, he can get eyesight on other squishies that are kind of running around, delete a Brig if he has to. But I think with him promoting and the Overwatch League promoting his new skin, I think the spotlight's going to be on him even more to make sure that he's performing. Because I don't know about you, but if I was a casual fan of the Overwatch League and I'm hearing about this skin that's in game, yeah, I'm going to check out NYXL and see what they're all about. But if the main player that's named, MVP of last season isn't really making an impact to carry games, I don't care. And I think part of the legacy of NYXL of just being Mr. Consistent, I think that starts to fade away if their players can't make those just can't carry, can't just make plays. Yeah. So I'm putting pressure on Jernak. And hopefully this extra pressure gets him to just meditate, take another shower before the game, and get the W's.
You gotta live up to that skin because, it is sexy.
It's a good skin.
Yeah. It's hard to live up to that, but Jonak has the potential and the talent to do it for sure. Has had maybe not as good of a season, but I still think he is way up there in terms of the elite off or flex supports in this league. So definitely a good pick there to keep an eye out for him this week, and then on into next week as well with the 2 games they'll have at the Atlanta homestand. But let's move on now to the real reason that we are all here, and that is of course the predictions. And first, real quick, let's throw up everybody's record up on the screen right now.
I'm not winning anymore.
He's no longer winning the overall season. Darby has taken over that mantle, has assumed the top spot. But among the
Darby has taken my crown.
Today, Ethan is still the best among us. Still one game above Duran, and I'm way back. I've had a rough go of it with these predictions. Last week especially with all the upsets was not kind to me. Not gonna lie, but we go again this week, and we'll try and bounce back. But let's start with a few of our most interesting games, and specifically kicking things off with the first game of the week. One we talked a little bit about earlier, and that is the Valiant taking on the Hangzhou Spark. Now, Duran, what do you think is going to be kind of the deciding factor in a series like this, and who do you think is going to be coming out on top?
Well, I'm still riding the LA hype train, so I think as long as LA sticks to whatever scouting and pre-match warm-ups and routines that they do to prep for teams, I think as long as they play the game that they've been playing for the past few weeks, they're going to pull ahead. I don't think, as much as trust me, I love Crystal. I love everything that's going on with No Smite and everything over on the Hangzhou side, but I really think that LA has something, an extra intangible skill or quality that they're able to draw upon in the middle of these games. I don't know whether it's a clutch factor. I don't know if they just believe that they're going to win these games more, but there's something in the water in LA, because both of these teams are on fire this stage right now. And my solid prediction is going to be actually a 3-2 LA into Hangzhou, but I don't think it'll be close. I think the score will look a lot closer than what it actually ends up being.
Fair enough. Ethan?
So I am the lone Hangzhou supporter out of the 3 of us. However, I represent all 5 other people who have put Hangzhou as their team of choice. Darby, Sam, Kate, Connor, and Rob have all voted for Hangzhou. So I will speak on behalf of all of them and say that, like I said, I don't fully ride the Valiant train. I think the Valiant will probably win their match against London. I really think that Hangzhou is a top team more than people are giving them credit for, even still. I think they're 4th, if not 3rd best in the league. And I still think that Valiant beating the Titans was just a little bit of a fluke. If they win this one, I will be proven very wrong. But I really do think that Hangzhou has the potential to be, possibly at this point, one of the top 3 GOATs teams in the league. And once the meta switches, who knows? But I think that they will have the Valiant's number and know how to counter them. I do think it will be close, but I think Hangzhou has the edge. They've had more practice with this current roster. They've had more practice with this current style. They know what they're doing.
Fair. I mean, this is one of the harder games to predict that I think we've had in a while, just because it's we don't have a lot of tape on the Valiant, or at least the new look Valiant. Like they've come out, they've knocked everybody's socks off, but it's unclear at the moment. Are they going to be able to keep it up? I'm of the opinion that they can. I think the grasp that they have of the meta and how to play around Sombra specifically is maybe the best in the league at this point. They just really seem to be firing on all cylinders. The vibes on that team are incredible right now. Like, after their confidence has to be just at an all-time high after last week, and I think that will probably be enough to carry them through. But like you said, Hangzhou has been proving themselves to be an elite team during this stage, especially, and to get a second straight win over a team like that would really catapult LA into kind of the stratosphere of everybody's estimation of a team like this. So I think they have the goods to pull it off, but you can bet that I am not taking my eyes off this game for a second, because this might be the most excited I've been for like a regular season matchup that I don't have any kind of stake in. Like, I'm not a fan of either of these two teams, but I absolutely cannot wait to see this one. But let's move on from there. We've talked about LA a lot here tonight because, of course, they're a very interesting team. But let's move on to our next kind of debated and disputed matchup of the week, and that is the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Boston Uprising, who are fresh off a reverse sweep. They seem to have gotten a little bit of their reverse sweep mojo back last week when they were able to take down the Paris Eternal despite going down 2-0 and turn that series around. But I'm not convinced that it's enough for them to turn their season around.
We can go ahead and call this one Ethan's terrible pick of the week, because I'm the only one who picked this for Boston winning. I really just want to be contrarian.
I know what you mean, but explain yourself.
I don't. Okay, I have a bunch of tiny reasons that I'm like, maybe if they all come together. If Kelix and Aim God play, if they both happen to play again, I think they could have a chance. If not, then I think they've already lost. They played Philly very close last time. It was 2-1. And Boston's coming off the heels of a really stellar reverse sweep against the Rising Paris squad. I think if a perfect storm comes together, Boston could win, even though they haven't really shown that they can win. I don't have anything else. Philly should probably win this, but I really want to pick Boston to win.
I mean, I'm not like convinced on Philly either by any means.
That's also it, yeah.
Yeah, like they could absolutely throw this. Like that's definitely a possibility. But
Very Philly thing to do.
I think they've been at least consistent enough during this season. Like they haven't been good, but they haven't been awful at any point this season. I think we give them a lot of crap because the expectations for that team were really high, and we know they're incredibly talented, but I still think they have enough in the tank to take down Boston.
You're probably right.
See, for me, when I look at the map pool, right? So we're gonna have Nepal, Horizon Lunar Colony, Numbani, and Havana, right? Hoping that we don't go 5 maps, even though it's Boston and Philly, so most likely it's gonna go 5 because they don't know how to play 4 maps. I don't see Boston winning Horizon Lunar Colony or Numbani. I think Sato's Winston play is just gonna dominate those 2 maps. And I think the portions of Havana and Nepal, like say they start on Sanctum, or say they start on Shrine, I still think his Winston play or the Rhine play when he does have high ground is going to be one of those clutch factors, because I think the head-to-head between Fusions and Sato is really going to be the determining factor. If whichever main tank is able to take over the game the most, I think their team is going to have the better opportunity to not throw. Because it's going to be a really interesting game to watch 2 teams that practically throw every game they play to see who's going to throw less.
I actually think it comes down a lot to Boston's DPS, because I think that they've been really the clutch factor for Boston recently. Despite how good Fusions is, RCK really has been iffy, and the support lineup has just been changing. Blase and Color Hex have really been the solid line for Boston right now, and I think depending on their play specifically will help determine the outcome of this game. I haven't seen much of Philly this stage, actually. I just haven't seen many of their games, so they could be a lot better than I'm giving them credit for, but I also don't know if I ever want to trust Philly again.
They've been getting carried by boombots left and right.
They're not a lot better than you think they are, but
no, they're the same old Philly that you remember.
Yeah.
So
they're
just
that we know and love.
This season, especially, like honestly, last year, like they were all over the place. That you could never count on them from week to week to even beat the teams that they should have. This year has honestly kind of been the opposite. Like they haven't really beaten any of the good teams, but they aren't losing to the bad teams either. And it's allowed them to like stay right, on the edge of playoffs, right, and kind of in the middle of the pack. So yeah, their consistency has actually been pretty good this year. So I think they'll be able to keep it going against Boston, but there's definitely upset possibility there because after last week, who the heck knows anything about this game?
Yeah. Well, Philly's like inconsistent to the point where it's almost like Seoul. You have seven, like a 7-player roster, but it feels like they have a bunch of different lineups, like different versions of each one of these players shows up every week, and it's insane. Yet managedly they're 10-8.
Bad Carpe, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, true. Carpe shows up. Poco hasn't been able to get bombs like crazy because everyone's getting better with the sound barrier.
Yeah.
You just can't set them up. It's gonna be interesting. You're right. It's gonna be fun.
Okay, so let's wrap up predictions here with the last one, which is going to be the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Guangzhou Charge. And now, Ethan, this is your team, and this is your chance to get up on the soapbox. And once again, kind of explain your pick here, because you are going with the Charge.
I am. I'm not alone in this one. I do have Kate's support on this, and we're totally not biased in any way. Yeah, sorry, Kate. Don't want to drag you down under the bus with me. But I do think that I don't think it's likely. I'm predicting them because I love them, but I also do think it is possible. Shanghai and Guangzhou both ended with the same map score against the LA Valiant in back-to-back weeks. They both got 3-1 by the Valiant, which is the same score that the Vancouver Titans have gotten by them. I think that Guangzhou played their best match of the entire season last week against the Defiant. Shanghai has looked like a pretty solid team, and I think that this will be close, but I think that there is a possibility that Guangzhou could be riding high right now, and that they've just had really difficult matches. They had Seoul, they were crushed by Seoul, and they had the Valiant, which have been rising way more than people anticipated at that point. People thought the Valiant were still bad when the Valiant beat them, but it was still a close match. And they beat Chengdu, and they beat Toronto. I think it is possible for Guangzhou to actually come out with a win on this. And if they really ride the momentum of last game where they played out of their minds compared to anything I've seen before. I was watching closely.
The thing about this game is, like, if you look at the levels of these two teams and how they've been playing recently in terms of like the opponents they've beaten and the people they've lost to, Shanghai like clearly has the edge. They beat Gladiators last week. That's more impressive than anything Guangzhou has done recently at all. And they did beat the Valiant back in week 1 before Valiant had really kind of taken off and really become what they are right now. So if you just look at it from that perspective, this feels like it should just be a pretty easy win. But the thing is, both of these teams have been playing kind of unorthodox styles, breaking out a lot of DPS. And with teams like that, they are primarily practicing that and perfecting that for playing against GOATS teams. When you put two teams like that against each other, anything kind of becomes possible in my mind. So that's the one thing that kind of gives me pause here. Also, Doomfist, is always scary when Guangzhou is on the field. Like,
I'm looking for the Happy Widowmaker versus Diem. Like, that would be insane.
Oh, that'd be good.
Give me that matchup for sure. So like that, I think it's possible for Guangzhou to make something and make this game interesting at the very least. Like, even if this isn't going to 5 maps or really super close, the clash of styles here I think is going to be fascinating to watch, and we'll get to see the DPS run free. So maybe a little bit of a sneak peek of what stage 4 might look like.
I'm still going with Shanghai. I think throughout the course of this year, we've seen some solid looks to show me that Shanghai knows how to handle the top tier teams. I don't want to consider it punching down because I think a lot of the teams in the middle fighting for that playoff spot, whether it be for stage or for the full year, are kind of interchangeable to a degree. But I've seen the way Shanghai has handled Chengdu. I've seen the way they've handled themselves against London. Even before London kind of got back on track, they were still London Spitfire returning champs. And I just think that the Sombra play is, I think Ding's going to take over. I think if we're going to get any value out of Guangzhou's Doom, they're going to have to really play around upon the Sombra and Shanghai. And I don't know. I feel like if Shanghai loses the game, it's going to be because they were falling asleep. And I don't want to take anything from Guangzhou, but I really buy into the fact that Shanghai belongs in that top 10. And I think they've proven through the matches that they've lost. Some of the games they've lost against top teams are 3-2. You can't tell me a team that goes 3-2 against like Hangzhou Spark but loses to Chengdu is awful. Because everyone was getting dropped by Chengdu. Vancouver's first loss almost came to Chengdu the first time they played them. And you would remember a lot more, Ethan, but did Shanghai play Guangzhou so far this season?
Nope, because they played them twice back to back.
That's right, because they played them this weekend. Yeah, that's annoying. Well, this first game is going to give us the test to kind of see what those matchups look like. And I think the second game is going to be like the stamp either way.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these back-to-back games that we've had where two teams play each other twice in the same stage, a lot of them have been an even more decisive victory in the second match. You saw that with Dallas Chengdu recently. I saw that a bunch with Guangzhou when they played Vancouver and Shock twice in the same stage. You really see that kind of almost a buildup of the previous game. So I really think that this first game is most important for Guangzhou to try to win, because if they can get a momentum and actually win this one, number one, I think that already puts them into the stage playoffs. I think that also gets momentum for the second game. If they lose this first one to Shanghai, I would not predict them against Shanghai in a million years for the second.
No, definitely not. This is kind of a must win for them. Like they really, if you look at where like the stage standings right now, there's going to be a lot of teams up at 5-2 at the end of this stage.
And this isn't a must win for Shanghai, so.
Yeah, that's true. I think, if you want to get in, you really need to be shooting for a 5-2 record. If you're 4-3, you're going to be kind of leaving it up to chance, or at least like in terms, you're going to be leaving up to your map record at least.
That's interesting
for sure.
Sorry, if Guangzhou wins, actually, even if they lose well, their map differential is even right now.
Yes,
for this stage. So even if they lose well and lose close, they are buying themselves time to still sneak in, because they'll have 2 more games left to kind of prove that they can just sneak in. So, Ethan, if anything, if they lose, just pray for like a 3-2.
Yeah.
If you pray because if they get a 3-2, it's a wrap. It's a wrap for the other teams they have to play, because Paris is above them. Get out of here.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. But that's gonna do it for our predictions this week. And we're gonna wrap up with everybody's favorite segment here at the WatchHaus preview show. And that is, of course, Rob's terrible pick of the week, which unfortunately we didn't do last week. We just forgot about it. Like,
yeah, I can't believe Rob just Rob. Yeah, nothing bad happened last week.
Yeah, no, Rob, had terrible picks, of course, as always, but we forgot to mention it. So we're picking it back up here with the pick this week is Rob's taking the Chengdu Hunters over the Seoul Dynasty.
But Rob is not the only one, Duran. Is that correct?
I just realized this a few minutes ago. I just noticed it.
I thought maybe I'd get away with that one.
Nope.
So now for once, actually, Rob is going to have a little bit of backup here. So, do you want to defend your mans here?
Yeah, I'm going to defend them right now. Listen, Chengdu's got the firepower, okay? They have unpredictability on their side, because, yes, we know that Seoul's got an 11-man roster, but Chengdu has the same roster, and you never know what they're going to do, except for Wrecking Ball. And then when you think they're going to run Wrecking Ball, they run Goats. And their Goats is not terrible. And I think the teamwork and the patience that's required to play triple DPS Wrecking Ball, because you're playing for poke, you're playing for ult, you're playing for positioning, and you're playing for ult combinations. I think that's the same kind of teamwork that goes into a team that has to square up against a 3-3. Now, I'm also in a scenario where I feel like I need all the constellations to align, and I need a bunch of other factors to coalesce into a win. Like, I need Marvel to throw. 100%. But if we can, pray and amen and just amen our way through victory, I think we'll be okay. I don't want to necessarily defend Rob because I don't know why he picked this game. But I know that Chengdu's got firepower. I think that can at least contest with 6 of the 11 players on Seoul.
My reason why this is an incredulous pick, more for Rob than for you. You have reasons. Rob obviously doesn't. Is that when Seoul played against Guangzhou, they had a specifically tailored roster for countering DPS because they knew that that's what Guangzhou played. Chengdu plays even more DPS. They did get rid of Fisher, who I think was an important part of that. They did get rid of that could leave an opening. But I also know that Chengdu's only 2 wins of the stage have both been against Dallas. So Chengdu, they don't, and their three other losses have been against middle of the road kind of teams. I forget exactly which ones they were, but the fact that their only 2 wins are against a very struggling Dallas field that has 1 win this stage, I don't think I can really say that Chengdu is doing all that great right now. So it's more that Chengdu has not been living up to my expectations recently. Then I think Seoul will have this.
Yeah, I think this is just gonna be a case of Seoul taking care of business against a team that they need to beat. Like if Seoul is losing to Chengdu, I think they've got serious problems because it feels like this whole season, Seoul has felt like they're always kind of on the verge of like cracking into that top tier of teams and really kind of being a contender, and they've never quite lived up to that potential. And honestly, I think that Fissure leaving might be a catalyst to help them reach that, get a little bit more stability in terms of the lineups, because I gotta say I'm not sold on the 11-man rosters and the swaps and whatnot.
Florida Mayhem.
It has its merits, but I can't say I think it's the best way to build a team really. So now that they at least have a main tank, Marvel is in the lineup. He is going to be playing. I think that could be very good for them as they move forward. So I think they'll be able to do it here against Chengdu. But I'm not gonna lie, this is my least confident Rob's terrible pick of the week that we've had so far.
Rob played everything else safe this week in an almost unbelievable fashion.
Yeah, he didn't.
Yeah, then he's like, but wait.
He didn't give us any fodder for this week, so we had to make do with what we could. So we'll see if maybe next week we'll come back and we forgot to do this again.
I just want to put it out now, so next week when it shows that Chengdu won this game, I don't want to hear anything about it. All right, don't at me.
Oh, you won't hear anything about it
because you want to existing.
This segment did not happen if Chengdu wins.
Wrong.
I know, I'm wrong.
All right.
You know what's funny too? Chengdu has like a really bad map differential anyway, so they'd have to win out the rest of the stage.
Yeah.
To even they've gone 3-4 twice in a row now. They could go 3-4 again, but
they're -9, so they'd have to actually just they'd have to sweep the next 2 games and then pray.
Yep. All right. Well,
not happening.
And their other game is against the Shock, so I don't think it's very likely for Chengdu to be doing well.
Yep. Probably gonna be some rough times for the Hunters coming up, but that is going to do it for us this week. Thank you all for joining us for the preview show. Watchpoint will be live in an hour and a half, basically, and then we've got some more incredible games coming your way this week. It's been a pleasure, as always. I've been your host, Shy Guy. Joining me, Duran and Ethan. It's been fantastic having you on for the first time, Duran, so thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And as always, from our house to yours, thanks for watching.